show you how the Comdata fuel card integration works. To start, I'll emphasize that the first step in the setup process is to establish the link between the drivers that are assigned to your fuel cards and the unique identifier that you've given Comdata. That's a step that you'll go through with Comdata during implementation, but it's important to do as the first step for record keeping in the TMS. The important unique identifier here is the fuel card driver number. Here I have just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for Bruce Fleet Carrier 2. And the reason that's important is because the next step in the process, after setting up your Comdata credentials, which are in TMS Admin, under Credentials, and we have really thorough documentation on this part, so I'll be sure to keep it brief here, but be sure to reference the documentation as you're going through these setup steps. So under Comdata, you'll enter your credentials, you'll make sure fuel cards is active, you'll save. Once you have done all of that, you'll run our new fuel card job. And what this does is saves you the manual step of building all of these fuel cards, and instead, it will pull in all of the fuel cards, regardless of their status, under the account and customer IDs that you've provided. So again, saving you the manual step of building all these cards. And the reason that it's so important to establish that unique identifier, the employee ID in Comdata, on the driver record is because when we pull in all those fuel cards, we'll find the linked driver record matching to that employee ID, and we'll create that link ourselves. And that linkage is extremely important as we match transactions to cards, which we'll come back to in a little bit. Now, before I move on, I'm using the example of a driver here, as is sort of the typical way to use these fuel cards. Each driver gets their own card, and they take it with them from load to load and potentially from tractor to tractor. We also allow you to use the asset. Here's my asset. This is a fuel card that is linked to an asset as opposed to a driver. And this is because some companies out there might want to leave the card in the cab, so to speak. This allows for that scenario as well. And the same is the case for the setup steps here. First things first, in the fuel card unit number, add that employee ID. Okay, so we've done the bulk of the setup. We've pulled in all our fuel cards because you have established the link here. You've run the job, and now you have your full list of fuel cards. Now the next step is to manage the permissions of your users in the system. In our e-payment administration, and I'll show you actually how you get here. I'll go to TMS Admin, e-payment administration. This is sort of the hub, if you're not familiar, for all of the ComCheck and fuel card permissions and how it's administered. Under the new Fuel Card Authority tab, you'll see our Comdata permissions. Now this is a handy tool because instead of having to build user after user into this list, we pull the list of active users from your system so you don't have to manually build each of them, and then you can bulk assign permissions simply by clicking into the table. Now I don't want everybody to have these permissions, so I'll undo that here. Oops. I want it blank, apply, and I just want myself to have all of these permissions. And you see we've broken it down according to each of the components in this integration that we'll come back to in a bit, and you'll see how each of these work, but just know that each action that can be done to a fuel card can be granted as a permission on this page. So your users have permission, your cards are in the system. The last step before you're really up and running is to go back and make sure that any cards that did not get automatically linked, likely either because they are inactive and don't have a driver associated to them yet, or because there may have just been a blank employee number field, will need to have those records linked. So here's an example. My driver, Bruce Fleet Carrier 2, does not have a card, but he has his unique ID here. I will go to a fuel card, back from my list here. I will go down to the bottom to the TMS assignment section. The assignment type here will remain driver. I'm going to search for Bruce. Save. And you know you've done it right if your employee number is listed here in this read-only field on the card. So we've got our fuel card set up, and this is the view you'll have with the newly associated card. Now I'll mention one thing that's very important to this integration, and it's that we never store your real Comdata card numbers. For security reasons, we make sure to keep that information completely private, and we don't store it at any point in the process. So if you're searching for a card that, for example, the driver has just told you arrived in their welcome packet, like, hey, I got fuel card 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so on and so forth. To search for that card and find the right one, you'll need to go back to ePayment Administration, to the Fuel Card Authority, to our new Secure Card Number Search. Now how this works is this is a way for you to search on the real card number without us ever storing that value. Search and success, I have a match found. So this link will take me to the right record. But that's because, again, I can't search based on the actual card number in this field. And until I actually have somebody assigned, I can't search based on some of these other fields. Now, excuse me, once that status is active, now I can search based on the masked card number, the last 4 digits, or the fuel card name, which includes the alternate card number and the person it's assigned to. So if, for example, I knew that the last 4 digits were 7506, when I type that into search, that fuel card will come up. And again, we know how challenging the management of some of these reference numbers on cards can be, so we just want to make that a little easier for you here with the secure card number search and with some of the additional search fields. Okay, now we're back on our fuel card page here, and I'll break down each of the components that you'll see when you open it up. The first is the fuel card control panel. This is the one-stop shop for all of the actions that you can take on this card. Your options that are instantly viewable include Get Card Info, which just pulls the latest card info for the limits and details. The Reset PIN, which does exactly what it sounds like. Type in a handy PIN and hit set. Issue Funds, which allows you to add Express Cash onto this card. And issue one-time limits, which is, if you're familiar with Comdata, those one-time limits that overwrite the weekly limits that you have set on the card with the multiple types present there. In the drop-down is where all your status changes live. So you can deactivate an active card, you can place that card on hold, or you can delete it with Comdata. Important to note, this delete button deletes the record in the TMS, but it also still exists in Comdata. So next time we run that job to pull your list of cards, this card will come right back. To delete, you have to do the Comdata delete. Moving on from the control panel, you'll see those high-level reference numbers here at the top under card information. You'll see your Comdata limits here, and the one difference is these will be read-only fields when you see them. That's because these fields can't be edited in Revenova that then affect what's in Comdata. This is a set of one-directional fields, which means the information in Comdata is pulled into Revenova solely for information purposes. Now you can, of course, edit those one-time limits and the balance using these actions here, but it's important to note that you need to take the action in the control panel. Just editing those fields in the TMS will not actually change anything in Comdata. Finally, we've talked already a little bit about the TMS assignment section. Your assignment type options are driver or asset. Driver if every driver has their own card. Asset if the card stays in the cab. Now, we've been through all of that, so it's time to get to perhaps the most important part of the fuel card integration, which is the fuel card transactions. Now, in the fuel card page on the related tab, you'll see the list of fuel card transactions that we pull in on a regular basis using our fuel card job. We recommend for that reason that you schedule this job to run as opposed to pushing run now, because that will automatically reschedule itself to run every 3 hours and pull in the latest transactions. Each transaction is related to a set of transaction line items telling you exactly what was spent on this transaction. You'll get the amount, and then you also have this other information that Comdata gives us around the location, the city, and anything else you might need to reconcile the information on this card. Finally, In addition to managing the transactions on a given card, we also manage fuel card advances for reporting purposes. Now, the way you create an advance is by issuing funds onto a balance-based card simply by clicking issue. You see it happens quickly. We have our confirmation number, and then down in our fuel card advances, I now have my $150 record that can be used again to report on the cash that I've already granted onto a card in anticipation of future transactions. We also manage the fees on these issue of funds and allow you to subtract the fees during the issue process if necessary. To show you what I mean, on that same issue of funds, if I hit subtract fees, it comes down to the difference between whether those fees are subtracted from the loaded amount. Oops, got to go to the related tab, of course. Or whether they are left on the amount. So again, here you see those fees for $1. The amount I issued was $200, but the amount that actually reached them was $199. Jumping back to that card to look at my $150, you see that I added $150 and the amount loaded was $150. Now that about covers our Comdata integration for fuel cards. Now again, you have the complete ability to manage the card process from beginning to end in the TMS. You can take action on the card using the control panel. You can adjust the status of that card, and you can administer or monitor some of the preset settings that come directly from your Comdata account. And our goal here is to give you a holistic view of all of the financial transactions related to a driver on a load. You can manage your com checks already with our previous integration, and now in this integration, the fuel card side of that business as well. As you can tell, we're excited about this expansion of our Comdata integration.